Welcome to the Homeschool Show from North Carolinians for Home Education. Our goal is to help you homeschool with confidence and joy. I'm your host, Matthew McDill, and we have as our co-host today, Amanda Wares.
Yes, absolutely.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Tell us what we got going today.
All righty. So today in homeschool news, we're going to be talking about homeschool numbers in Texas and a field trip to see Hamlet. And then for our homeschool conversations, we are going to hear a interview with Brandon and Lynn Baker. And then with Homeschool Helps with Amanda, I'm going to be talking about the big question.
Okay.
It is, what about socialization?
What about socialization?
That is the biggest question that everybody gets.
Right.
And then you are going to be sharing with us some more wisdom from the Word, 2 more tips for how to stop fighting in our homes.
That's right.
I can't wait for that.
Very good. So we'll kick it off with homeschool news and look at what's going on in Texas with the homeschool population. This is a headline in the Texas Tribune. More Texans turned to homeschooling after the pandemic showed them what learning outside of schools could be like. And this is by Brian Lopez on November 21st of this year. Research suggests homeschooling was already growing in popularity before the pandemic. But according to the Census Bureau's Household Pulse survey, an effort to examine the impact of COVID-19 on American life, the percentage of Texas families that homeschool their children went up in 2020 from 4.5% at the end of 19 and 20 to 12% at the start of the 2021 school year.
Wow.
The increase was particularly notable among Black families. So continuing with the article here, according to data collected by the Texas Homeschool Coalition, a nonprofit that promotes and advocates for homeschooling in the state, about 30,000 students across the state withdrew from a public or charter school and switched to homeschooling during the spring of 2021, an increase of 40% compared to the previous year. The figure is likely higher because the state does not track withdrawals from public school below the 7th grade, said Jeremy Newman, a coalition's deputy director. So this article went on to cite the reasons in Texas, and you're going to see that they're pretty common nationally and in North Carolina for why people are choosing to homeschool.
Sure.
One of them is that people were actually afraid of COVID during COVID, and so they wanted to stay at home.
Definitely.
Another is parents who were right on the edge of the education question or the homeschool question started seeing the benefits. And they're like, wow, this is great. The Uvalde school shooting on May 24th, in which 19 students and 2 teachers were killed, might have led some parents to switch to homeschooling this year, this reporter said.
Yeah.
And that's such a sad reality, but the fact is parents want their kids to be safe, and homeschooling is one of those ways that they choose to do that.
True.
Another reason is that differences over how race and sex are taught at schools also played a role. Continuing with the article, while the topic has stirred tensions between families and educators in the past, they intensified during the pandemic as more public school lessons were transmitted to family computers during lockdown. So basically, the parents started seeing what was in the lessons, and they just weren't okay with it.
Right.
And they're like, that is not how I want to teach my children the values related to race, related to sex.
Absolutely.
And then finally, we have the good old bullying, drugs, and poor academic achievement, which has kind of always been part of the scenario, right?
Yep.
Continuing with the article, opting to homeschool in Texas is fairly simple and mostly unregulated. If a child is pulled from a public school, the parent must notify their local school district that the child will now be homeschooled. Parents don't need to notify the district they live in if their child was never enrolled in a public school. The only requirements are that the child's learning must be in a visual format, like workbooks or online courses, and that the curriculum must go over reading, spelling, grammar, mathematics, and what the state calls good citizenship. So that's interesting. That's different than North Carolina, where they actually say you have to cover particular subjects.
Yes.
And that it's visual. I don't know.
I can't think of what
I guess it could be all auditory.
I guess so.
Interesting.
Okay.
And one last quote from a parent. Since starting homeschooling, one parent said that her kids fall in love with learning again.
Wow.
School doesn't seem like a chore or something that must be done to pass a test. that's a good fruit, a good result right there.
Definitely.
So anyway, that's what's
the
going
goal.
on in Texas. And I think it's interesting to see what's going on nationally and kind of compare it with North Carolina.
It is. It's so neat to see how what's happening there really compared to what's happening here, and how
Yeah.
some of the same things, some
Yeah,
of the
that's
same
right.
reasons too. All right, so now I want to tell you about a field trip coming up.
Right.
Super exciting. We are going, NCHE has a field trip coming up to go see Hamlet at the Playmakers in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It is coming up on Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. Come with NCHE to experience this Shakespearean classic. Playmakers Repertory Company is the professional theater in residence at UNC Chapel Hill. Now, the target age for this performance is middle school and up. Tickets are $11.25 each, and they may be purchased until noon on Monday, January 16th, or while supplies last. I know, I've already got my tickets, so
nice.
Hopefully you guys get your tickets.
Go see
to
Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely. nche.com/2023-Hamlet. So
That's where you can find out
with
more.
us. Yeah.
All right, for Homeschool Conversations today, we're going to show another interview we had with a couple of parents at the Thrive Conference. John Lewis, one of our hosts, was able to talk to them and ask them what they've been learning and how their conference experience was. So let's listen into that.
Awesome.
Hey guys, we're at the Thrive Homeschool Conference in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I'm sitting with Brandon and Lynn Baker, and they're from Seagrove, Ashboro, that general area of the state. And Brandon, I know you said you're in law enforcement, and obviously you're homeschooling. You guys have how many kids?
4.
4 kids. What's the span of their ages?
Our oldest is 10, and the baby is 1. So.
Oh, wow.
And 6 as well. So.
Wow, 10, 8, 6, and 1. And so how long have you been homeschooling?
This will be our 3rd year. So.
Okay, excellent. And this is your first year at the Thrive Conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did you guys find out about Thrive?
I attended the NCHE Women's Conference this past fall, and everyone gave it rave reviews, so
Yeah.
we knew we had to put it on the docket for spring.
Excellent. And I'm glad that you're here with her, Brandon. A lot of times husbands think, well, I'm not sure that that's really anything I need to be a part of because mom's the one who's doing the hands-on day-to-day usually. But I think it's a really beneficial thing for you to be here together. Obviously, homeschooling is a journey for both of you to do together. So what do you think about the conference so far?
I think it's been good. She and I were discussing it's hard to just pinpoint a favorite speaker we've had so far.
Yeah.
But we've just enjoyed the variety of just different topics and things that kind of meet us where we're at in terms of our tenure as homeschooling parents.
Right.
And also the needs of our children. They all have different learning styles. They're different grades, obviously, or different levels. And that's just been beneficial to kind of get some insight from folks that are more seasoned and have went through it, and just to kind of walk us along that process of either selecting curriculum or just other resources that are just outside the box.
What are some of the things, though, that have been really good takeaways for you guys so far in the conference?
I think primarily for me is like we have them at different ages. So, and I know the days that I've helped Lynn out with homeschooling, I found it a challenge just to try to figure out how to, do it all quickly and try to get them across the finish line. Let's get to lunch. Let's get our learning done. And it's a challenge because they are on different levels. And one of the speakers yesterday was talking about how to manage all of that, and it just really gave some good tools to carry back to lower, just that stress associated with that, and just trying to make sure that they are learning together as a group as they would if they were in public school. She and I both were graduated from public school, so the homeschool world is all new to us in a lot of different ways. So.
Lynn, what about you? What are some of your favorite takeaways so far?
I have loved that there have been classes associated with needs that each child has I guess brought to the table.
And it's encouraging to come here because it's kind of like when Elijah's on Mount Carmel, he feels like he's the only one there, but he doesn't see the prophets that's hid in the cave. And this is kind of like when you come here, it's like, well, you're not the only one that's trying to do the right thing by your kids and by you for their education, even though the world tells you something different. And so it's inspiring and it's encouraging to be around those types of folks that are like-minded.
Yeah.
And just know that there's just we're all wanting to see each other succeed and their kids succeed in it. And if you stop learning, you stop growing. And I think that if we think just even 2 years in, if we think, okay, there's really nowhere we can improve, then we're kind of deceived, and and everyone can grow and learn new things all the time to make things better.
Awesome. Lynn, anything you want to add?
I'm thankful that my friends that do homeschool have encouraged me to come here, and from the women's conference. So it's always good to be in community with other people that are like-minded. It's good to be in community with anyone, but it's an extra little bit of inspiration and encouragement when you find other people that are on the same road and path and the same struggles as you.
Yeah, really glad that you guys are here, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you this weekend. And so Brandon and Lynn, thank you for joining us for Thrive and for this. This will be something helpful to the homeschool community, to the homeschool show.
Good. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so one of the things that Brandon and Lynn especially emphasized was being a part of a community and seeing that a lot of other people are doing this,
Yes.
And so I think that's really great as far as the conference. I hope this show is also a way that you're seeing a lot of interviews, a lot of people, a lot of parents doing this. And we're bringing a lot of that to you here so that you can see you're definitely not alone. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us have been doing this for quite a while, and we're here to help you get through it and to help you know how to handle all of these things, which is what you're going to do now. You're going to help us. Homeschool Helps with Amanda live.
Right. Yes.
And so you've already told us that we're going to talk about the question.
Yes.
What about socialization? And one of the little paragraphs that I didn't read yet from that article from the Texas Tribune was from Peggy Semingson. She's an associate professor at the University of Texas at Arlington who tracked homeschooling during the pandemic. Okay, so in this article, she was quoted. She warned that families also have to weigh the impact on homeschool children of not getting the socialization they would get in a public school setting.
Oh, wow.
So what do you have to say to Peggy?
Okay, so we all get the question.
Right.
No matter if you've been homeschooling 5 minutes or 5 years or 15 years or 20 years, you will get the question, what about socialization? I don't know why, even after homeschooling has been legal for over 30 years, even after we have well over 100,000 registered homeschool families in North Carolina, we still get this question, and it's shocking to me.
And even after all of the data and research that's come out,
Right.
that homeschool students are not just well-adjusted, but better adjusted
Absolutely.
emotionally and relationally.
Absolutely. This is still the biggest question that people will ask of you as a homeschool family, and new homeschool families still ask this question. Now, there is a realistic part of that question. Of course, we want our children to have social opportunities. We want, as families, to find our people. That's important. We have to have that, right? But I want to challenge you, all of us, in how do we think about socialization? And maybe that's what I would answer Peggy by saying, how do you think about socialization? Is it just being in a group of people that are your same age in one place for hours at a time? Is that really social?
Is that your definition?
And I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I got in trouble for talking too much. I got in trouble all the time for talking too much, and I wasn't allowed to socialize in school. So I just don't think that's a valid concern at all. When I think about socialization of my homeschooled children, I have found that over the years, they have literally socialized with people of all ages, of all stages, of all backgrounds, in many different situations and contexts. So they have a much more natural and real social experience, right? So that is how I think about socialization. That's how I would challenge you to think about socialization. Just change your mindset just a little bit. Now, back to, we want to be social. We want our kids to be social. We need to find our people. And where do we find those people? So that can be a challenge, because unlike in the public school setting, you're not just automatically in a room with them. You have to find them. And where do you find those situations? So I'm going to give you some ideas that maybe I have experienced, my kids have experienced. One would be sports. There are many sports opportunities. My kids have made lots of friends through sports. It could be recreational, the YMCA or NCHE has a great athletic conference where we have many sports teams that's for middle school and high school level, but that's great opportunities. Maybe co-op classes. There are tons of co-ops all around that you could take, many different kinds of classes, many social opportunities there for your kids to make friends, to enjoy being with other kids. It's a great opportunity. How about a local homeschool group? I know our local homeschool group, we have field trips, we have park days, we have all kinds of opportunities, field day, lots of opportunities for kids to enjoy being together and do social things. Another option might be 4-H or some other kind of club. There are lots of those out there that are homeschool specific or not. Something like Civil Air Patrol or the Young Marines. The options are endless.
Our kids are in speech and debate.
Absolutely. Speech and debate is a fabulous club opportunity to be with other kids. Also, I want to encourage you not to forget about your local library. That's a great resource that sometimes we forget about. Our local library has lots of clubs and all kinds of opportunities to get together and do things. One couple last things. Don't discount the socialization that your kids get with their siblings.
Right.
In your own family, they are getting lots of socialization right there. And last but not least, what I always say, if you really want to find your people, go to Chick-fil-A during the day. Absolutely. You can always find other homeschoolers at Chick-fil-A. So that's my answer to what about socialization?
Well, I would add a couple of things to that. One is that if your kids are in public school, they are definitely being socialized. And that's actually not the socialization we want.
Absolutely.
They're being taught ways to talk, things to look at, activities to be involved in, that we are not interested at all in them being socialized in that way.
Absolutely.
We want them to be socialized in these other ways.
Yes.
And of course, I don't think we want to fail to mention being a part of a local church is such a great way. Our kids love the student group that they're in, or the kids program, and they meet all sorts of kids. And of course, that's where I want them to be socialized.
Absolutely.
To learn to act in different ways. And and really talking about the home culture, the home community. You know, one of the having big families or having multiple children was one of the situations in which we found that kids did better in social ways, you know, later on in life. And so that really leads us back into our topic of, you know, wisdom from the word being, how do we help stop the fighting in our home?
Right.
And we're going to really get into this idea of how am I teaching my kids to relate to each other? This is socialization. This is like, how do I get along? How do I deal with conflict?
Yes.
What am I going to do about these things? So that's what we're going to jump right back into. Last week, we talked about the number one thing you can do is set a peaceful example. How am I treating my spouse? How am I treating my kids? Am I showing them what it looks like to act in a gentle way, in a kind way, and not to be quarrelsome? So we're going to do a couple more points for today. I'm reminded that somewhat recently I went downstairs and I heard, way before I got there, I heard screaming.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't screaming like somebody got hurt. It was anger. And I found that one of my sons, he was 10, he was like raging. Like he was in a rage. I mean, it was just like,
no.
what is happening
Yes,
right now?
yes.
And so when I walked in, boy, it just stopped. Everybody like, oh, because they know what's about to fall when there's raging and yelling going on, which is
Right.
what we're about to get into. So how do you deal with that? I mean, some of our kids just go bonkers.
Yes.
And there's a lot of yelling or conflict. So how are we going to deal with that? And I'm going to give you a couple of tools to handle that.
Great.
The first one today is set basic rules of engagement. Okay, what are the rules? And here they are. No yelling, no violence, and no manipulation.
Ooh.
Okay, so those are my big top 3.
Okay.
Now, I want to clarify a couple of things. When I say no yelling, I mean being angry. One of the things that we've noticed about our house is it's pretty loud at our house,
Same.
but not in a bad way.
Sure.
It's like fun. We're just like, we're being too loud. I mean, we're laughing, we're yelling, we're having a good time. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
No, there's something to be said for just peacefulness. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about angry yelling is against the law
Okay.
at the home. Number 2 is no violence. Once again, I just want to clarify. I don't mean a friendly wrestling match.
Right.
We have lots of wrestling and violence or whatever
Right,
at our
sure.
house. And I'm not talking about that. I mean aggression. Like
Right.
you are angry and so you're being violent. Most importantly, and a lot of times subtly, is manipulation. Okay. And so my kids are always trying to manipulate each other. You know, it's like, well, I'm never going to talk to you again. I'm never going to play with you again. And some of them have even said, you know, I hate you. And I don't know where they get this kind of language, you know. But then you could have the spiritual manipulation, which is, you know, Jesus wants you to do this, you know, and you're trying to convince them with spiritual manipulation.
no.
Or you have terrorism, like, I'm going to go break your stuff. Like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going into your room, I'm going to find your favorite thing, I'm going to break it. So these kinds of things are absolutely against the law. There is
Okay.
no manipulation in the home. And so you set these out and you make sure that these are the top priority. So, for example, here's a recommendation. When you hear a fight, and there's violence or there's yelling or there's manipulation, and you enter into that space, then the first thing you do is address those rules. You don't get sucked into the issue, which is, oh, that person took that from me, or that person bothered me, or none of that matters. The only thing that matters in that situation is to get these basic rules of engagement. So when I walk in, I say, I don't care what happened. Do not tell me what happened. Whoever is yelling is in trouble.
Okay.
Whoever is violent is in trouble. Who's ever manipulating is in trouble. And if you want me to hear your case on some other issue, then the first thing you have to do is handle it differently.
Wow.
Okay, so that's, and if that's the first issue, it stops the fighting in your house.
Right.
Because they're going to get seriously have consequences if they do those things.
Right.
So let's go to the final tip here, which is, okay, what if they aren't screaming and yelling and hurting each other, and then they have a complaint? One of the worst things ever is tattling.
Oh,
My kids
So true.
always are wanting to tell on each other
sure.
and say, well, he was a jerk, or he took my stuff, or he broke my thing. It's just like constant. And so that is one of the worst things. And it's a wonderful thing to cut out,
Yes.
is tattling. So I've got the
Okay.
way that this works. And it really works. Like my kids understand how this is going to happen. Basically, it starts with teaching them some modified version of the Matthew 18 process. Okay, so if you're familiar with Matthew 18, it's like, well, what if your brother sins against you? What do you do? First, you go and tell him between you and him alone.
Okay.
All right, so that's the first step. So if my kid comes to me and they tell on somebody, oh, somebody did this and this, then I say, did you talk nicely to them about it? That's my first question.
Right.
And if they say no, I say, bye. Like, I'm not listening. You go talk to your brother about it. You go talk to your sister about it. So this is teaching them
Yes.
right off the bat that they have to work things out and they have to talk to each other and try to do that. And I'm not even going to hear their case unless they've done that.
Okay.
Okay, so the second thing is, have you talked to them? Yes, I have. Well, what's the issue? And then they say it. If it's a legitimate issue, then we talk about how to handle it. Sometimes it's not a legitimate issue. Sometimes it's, well, they were humming. And it was really bothering me. It's like, too bad.
Sure.
They were
sure.
humming. You know what I mean? It's like, and so you have to help them process. Well, you have to get along with people,
Sure.
and they might hum.
Sure.
They might sing a song, and you're just going to have to be okay with that.
Right.
But the most important thing is if there's a legitimate issue, it's very important that we are consistent to respond in a just way. Because if they feel like, okay, I'm going to go through all the rules and I'm going to bring it to you, and then you're not going to do anything about it,
Right.
then they're not going to bring it to you. They're going to take matters into their own hands, and now we're back to violence and manipulation for sure.
Right.
All right. So anyway, I think these tools are helpful for you. Get your ground rules going. No yelling, no violence, no manipulation. And then secondarily, make sure that you teach them how to talk to each other first. And then if they bring things to you, discern the issue and deal with it if it needs to be dealt with.
That is so great and so important.
Yeah,
They can take it all through their life.
that's right.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us this week. We would love to hear from you. Please send your questions and feedback to the Homeschool Show at nche.com. Help others find this show by subscribing, rating, leaving a review. That's great. And tell your friends, tell your family. To learn how to subscribe to our show as a podcast and on YouTube, visit nche.com/The Homeschool Show.
All right. Until next week, continue to homeschool with confidence and joy.